How many of you belong to a gym, or pre-COVID at least belong to a gym? Which show of hands? Many of you. Well, women, I'm not slighting you when I tell you this story, but men, you've been going to the gym for a long time. You know what it's like in the locker room. You know when there are two or more older gentlemen sitting around. Kind of like when Jesus said, when two or more are gathered in his name. When there are two or more older guys sitting around talking, they always talk about three things. Their doctor, their medicines, and their aches and pains. You're laughing because you know it's absolutely true. I've experienced it many times from being a young guy looking back thinking, God, I hope I never get like that when I get older. To hearing it now when I'm sitting in the locker room with those older guys. One day, we were sitting around after the workout in the locker room just chatting. The usual subjects came up. And one of the gentlemen, the lector that day, at the Mass earlier in the morning, was actually talking about all the aches and pains that he was experiencing. And when he got done talking about them, he finally turned to all of the other people sitting there and he said, "Don't get old." One of the other guys sitting there said, in reply, "It beats the alternative." And another gentleman, sitting off by himself, really not engaged in the conversation, heard the last comment, looked up and he said, "I don't know about that." If you're laughing, you get it. If you're not laughing, you don't quite get it yet. Obviously, he was a man of faith. And the alternative to getting old for him was perfectly fine. Where to others, to most of us, we don't care to think about that alternative. Paul addressed that today in our second reading that we just heard, when he talked about this dilemma he had while sitting in a prison cell, not being treated very well, but saying he was okay with either one. Certainly going off to die, going off to heaven was what he looked forward to, was what he wanted someday. But if that wasn't the will of God at the time, he was perfectly fine with that to continue to live in the body. His logic is good logic for all of us of faith. Because he said while he lived, he would continue to do the good work that God asked him to do, and to be an example to others, so that they can see what it means even when being tormented, even when being tortured, even when being in prison, he could continue to be a joyful and happy person because he was doing the work of God, doing what God called him to do. Now, for many of us, that's one of these terrible dilemmas. How could you be joyful sitting in a prison cell? How could you be happy doing anybody's work when you were being treated so terribly, so unkindly, so unjustly? It's hard for us as human beings to sometimes even fathom that we can find joy in the worst of our situations. But that's because we are human. We're not God. None of us are God. But God teaches us how we can be even in our humanity. In the first reading today from the prophet Isaiah, we hear how our ways as human beings don't even come close to God's ways. We heard those words, "My ways are as high as the heavens, and my ways," God says, "are so much higher than yours." Because we just can't grasp that. But Jesus tries to help us out with that in the gospel reading today. Another one of those very easy parables to understand if we listen closely to it. He uses the parable of the landowner. And I won't go through the whole gospel reading, but he hired workers at the beginning of the day, he hired workers at the end of the day, and he hired workers in between. When it came time to get paid, he paid the last first. And he gave them the same pay he gave those people in work 12 hours long in the scorching heat, breaking their backs working in his vineyards. And they complained about it. They complained to the landowner. Why are we being treated so unjustly when we did the bulk of the work? Because we just can't comprehend God's ways. it's hard for us to accept that. And if you think it's not true, think about how you would react if you worked 12 hours and someone else received the exact same pay you did. Or think about when God talks about his ways being above our ways. When he tells us, as we heard in last Sunday's gospel reading, how many times should I forgive somebody who wrongs me? 7 times? Jesus says 77 times, 7 times. Or how about when Jesus says, love your enemies and pray for your persecutors? Is he kidding? We're supposed to love and pray for those who hate us, who try to do us harm. But that's where God's ways far surpass our ways. And even though it's hard for us to comprehend all that and to accept all that, that's exactly what Jesus calls us to do. It's the type of person he calls each of us to be. The type of person who can forgive, who can forget, who can love, and who can pray for those who may not be doing the same in kind. That's what makes us Christians. That's what makes us followers of Jesus Christ, when we can do those things that Jesus asks us to do. But again, we're human. It is so hard at times for us to accept those ways that God calls us to accept, and Jesus taught us by the life that he lived. So I would suggest to all of you, as I suggest to myself, our homework for this week would be to take some time and think about our end day. That day that will come eventually. And to think about, would we be like Paul and be joyful when that day comes? Or are we afraid of that day? Like the gentleman talked about in the locker room. I don't know about that. Think about